There's an infrastructure surtax, which is the quarter penny that's shared with the county. The voters approved the extension of that in November of 2022 to go through December 1st of 2045. And the district does receive a quarter of that, which is estimated to generate an additional $511 million through 2045. And then there is the school capital outlay surtax, that's half a penny, that's just for the school district. And in November of 2016, the voters had approved that for the half penny to go through 2036, December 31st of 2036. And it's estimated to generate an additional $604 million for the district through 2036. So that's not including the collections we already have, just moving forward from today. And so the capital needs, I know Sarah will help chime in on this slide as well. For the infrastructure surtax, the quarter penny, there's a transportation facilities, vehicles, and athletic facilities.
So yeah, so you guys are all familiar. Our capital plan is based on the fact that we are prioritizing our quarter penny for those needs. And then on our half penny sales tax program, that is primarily prioritized for our major comprehensive renovation projects and deferred maintenance, along with some of our safety and security dollars and technology infrastructure dollars. So those two different sales tax are prioritized for two different reasons, based on what they're legally allowable for, as well as what we put out to our voters that our intent was for those sources.
And when we look at this is two separate securities. So this isn't something that you would, combine the debt together and use the sources commingled to pay that debt service. These are separate securities, separate legal documents, and resolutions adopting these referendums moving forward.
And what I really wanted to stress was, if you look at the dollar amount of the revenues we're projecting to come in over the timeline of these revenue sources compared to what we know our needs are and our identified capital needs, obviously our needs continue to exceed the dollars flowing in, especially in the time frame that we want to get these projects done. So that's really what's now triggering the conversation about doing a financing, is so that we can continue on with our capital program and the projects that we have said we're going to do in these time frames.
And so for financing considerations, to piggyback off of what Sarah was saying, when we look at this, you have your pay-as-you-go dollars. The district has been excellent at utilizing that. It's, you pay for the construction as the revenue becomes available. The current user, they kind of say that that's who bears the cost of the construction. It's limited to your available revenues to be able to get those projects done. The disadvantage of that is, project costs can escalate over time, which we know we've seen this. A positive, though, is there's no interest expense, obviously, if you're using your pay-as-you-go funds. We do look at the offset, though, of potential increase in construction costs versus interest expense as well, which leads you to the pay-as-you-go. You can fund or pay-as-you-use, so that's issuing the debt. You bring the construction in and get the construction done as the need arises. So you don't have to wait to get those funds to come in. It spreads the cost of capital over time. So, as opposed to if you use the funds as they come in, you're saying the current, taxpayer pays those costs. This kind of spreads it over the next, 10 years of those sales tax revenues coming in. So it's spread over time. There is interest expense, though, obviously, if you're issuing debt. It enhances your construction capacity, though, when you're paying up front with a bond deal to get those construction costs started. And the useful life of the assets can be financed over time as well. So this one is your bonding capacity, and so this would be even more helpful, if we had the presentation of...
Although not color, so don't refer to colors.
Okay, we'll walk it through without the color, but if y'all want to hop to slide 11,
I'm going to say
in there.
Can we get iPads and just have them available with everything loaded so we don't have to be printing
I think
stuff?
that's a great idea.
Do that with the charters.
I also feel like I've said this like 30 times in the past 5 years. No one listens to me.
Okay, so everyone good on page 11?
Yeah.
So this is your bonding capacity for your quarter penny, the infrastructure sales surtax. Based on current market conditions, a district could fund an additional $171.6 million while maintaining the minimum debt service coverage of 1.5 times, which is what is required in the existing bond documents, and we would not recommend changing that. So in the graphic, what you're seeing, there should be three different kind of variations of gray. The first two at the bottom.
What does it look like?
Two. Okay, so
can't see the
here,
yellow,
let
really.
me.
There's actually
There's
three.
a line.
Well, I've got it here in color if we want to
Okay.
refer to this.
So this is your outstanding debt service here in blue. It currently expires in 2025, which would have been in line with the prior referendum. With that extension already in place that the voters approved, there's the ability then for the capacity that we go out to 2041. So that's what's here in yellow. That's 171 million. This line is off of this chart, which is showing you your coverage at your 1.5 times. And then this gray section here is all your pay-go revenues that still would be available for additional projects. So cash on hand that's coming in yearly to pay out. And we will now talk about the half penny, the
So,
school.
may I
Yes.
just ask a question? Is this saying that we actually have capacity built for things that we have to get done through 2041? And then after that, there's nothing assigned yet?
After that, the revenue source.
Stops.
You can't bump
Stops.
beyond what you collect in sales tax. Sales tax had to get renewed.
Okay, thank you.
And this is kind of funky because it does go through 2045, but you're seeing here it goes to 2041, and that's because of your 1.5 times. So we try to maximize the amount. So if you did, a little bit higher coverage, you could extend that out. This was just for presentation for you all to see. You could make the final maturity 2045 if you were wanting to go out that far on an issuance, and you would just do level, because we know you're not looking at issuing 171 million on this, but that's just showing you what that capacity is. So it kind of drops off there because we can't get over that 1.5 times with your debt service right now.
And that's part of what PFM helps us with, that expertise of how far out do we want to go, how much do we want to, tie up in debt service payments on an annual basis. So we look at all of those different scenarios.
And what are the closing costs and management fees to that? Because it can't just be interest only. The company that's issuing the debt has to charge us like a fee for.
Right, so we talk about a working group when you look at this. So depending on if you're doing a bank loan or a bond issuance, there's different parties that come within the working group. We have a contract with the district that's been approved by the board that has our fees outlined in there, same with bond counsel. If it was a publicly offered issuance, an underwriter would come in and they would charge what's considered a takedown, and then, their fees with the blue sky regulations that are in there, QSIPs for each bond that are pretty minimal that go into it, and then rating agency fees, which can be pretty hefty. Oftentimes, the rating agencies are paid more than bond counsel or any other party. Typically, bond counsel is your most expensive participant, and rating agency fees have really grown quite significantly. And then on the bank side, it would just be bank counsel and your financial advisor and your bond counsel.
What percentage of that? Like when I do real estate closings, we say closing costs are typically 6 to 9%. What's
So-
the percentage?
We don't typically look at it as percent-wise, but, you would say, I guess, per bond on an underwriter discount, we would say the maximum of 4%. So if it came to the board to do a publicly offered issuance, you would say your underwriter's discount is no more than 4%. Most all of the other parties that are under the cost of issuance already have contracts that are set in there, and it's based on the sizing of the par amount. So we don't typically do it, but those are paid like a real estate transaction upfront, in the
We just get the money
financing.
less the fees.
Correct.
So it doesn't say, so really we're only borrowing like say 96%. But is that total cost, or is that just does that include like the underwriting fee, the bank fees, and all the other fees put together?
Right, so for a bank loan, we would say that your fees probably wouldn't be more than 100, and we'll talk about this in a second. So if you're doing a $60 million bank loan, you would say your fees would probably be $150,000 at the most. So we can shake out the percent of what that is, but it's very minimal. It's not like what you have in
For
real
a bank
estate.
loan, but for a bond issuance.
For a bond issuance, your financial advisor, bond counsel fees, those all remain the same. the rating agency fees that pop in, they do base it on the amount that you're issuing as well. And then the underwriter's discount, I mean, we say no more than $4 a bond that when it comes to the board, but often it's closer to 3 or 3.5 per bond with all of their expenses included in that.
Can we get a number? You said a lot of stuff, but I need like.
Well, and it varies.
You don't have to give it to me right now, but like, hey, if we bonded $100 million, how much of that is in fees? Roughly, is it like 20,000, 100,000, $1 million in fees? You know what I mean? So if we bonded $100 million, how much in fees would it cost us to bond it?
I can get you a guesstimate on that. It does vary by transaction size, though, just so you're aware. So if I say $100 million is going to cost you X amount, like if you were to issue $150 million, it would cost a different amount versus $50 million. So, but
why don't we use the exercise of what we're requesting? Like whatever we're requesting to bond, why don't we just give us an idea what those fees would be?
So yes, do you want to?
We can just jump ahead. So right
sorry,
now
what
right now what we're recommending right now is a $60 million bank loan to move forward with right now. And then we would be looking probably 12 to 18 months out at doing a larger public issuance. Our rough estimates right now, we had them priced out at $120 million. That's something, as you guys know, as things change over time, as we reassess our needs. Rhonda's going to be rerunning numbers this fall. And then we'll be updating our capital plan again as we move into next year. Then we would kind of resize that at that point in time as we continue to monitor the market and figure out when's really the right timing, what's really the right amount at that point in time. So that's what we're looking at right now. The recommendation is a $60 million bank loan now, and sometime next year, somewhere around $120 million public issuance. So I know Laura can pull other examples. It doesn't necessarily have to be based on that, but maybe some other recent ones in that $100 million range, and just see what the total fees were.
And for the $60 million bank loan, we would not, I mean, we have to get the fees from bond counsel and get their contract to see what it would be, but we would anticipate no more than $150,000 for the $60 million bank loan. For what we're looking at now, but I can definitely look at, when we get closer to figuring out the project size for the issuance down the road, we can look at that as well and come back with more specifics for you.
Yeah, because if the fees are significantly different, why not just do 2 bank loans or 2 bond issuances? You know what I'm saying, depending on what the fees are.
Right, so,
Are the rates different?
The rates
bank loan versus
the rates
the
are
bond
different. I mean, they move with the market. Depending, sometimes it's better to do a bank loan. There's different considerations of why you might want to do a bank loan versus a publicly offered issuance. But the banks, the appetite that they take in-house too, sometimes they have limits on how far out in maturity they would go and the size amount, and it prices them out. So for a $120 million issuance, going out potentially to 2036, that would likely price out the bank appetite. But as we get closer, if we see that banks are having an appetite for that type of size of loan and that maturity, then we would be willing to consider looking at both and finding which is the best for the district.
Now, what are the interest rates on each? The market rate, more or less. Are they the same, or are they different, the interest rates they charge for the loan?
It
The bank loan
depends.
versus the bond?
It depends on the time in the market when you're going out and you're issuing.
I'm
So
saying, like, right now, if we were to issue right now,
Right.
or we get a loan right now, what's the differential in the interest rate between a bank loan and a bond loan?
it can be about 25 basis points to 30 basis points.
So they're still in the same range, so it's like if someone's a 1.5, that would be like 5.2, so it won't be 1.5, 1.7.
Right,
They'll be
right.
both in the same number.
Right. That's correct. So did you want to speak to the?
I mean, we had this conversation yesterday about the difference in rates and the pros and cons between going bank loan or going a public offering. So, I mean, I know timing was one of the considerations. I don't know if you want to speak to some of the others, but that rate differential is not huge right now. So we did say based on the timing and based on some of the other factors, that's why we're recommending this.
So for the $60 million deal, the recommendation would be for the bank loan. One of the providers has offered a rate lock where the others are indicative. So it means it's going to continue to float till this comes back to the board in October where you could actually lock in the rate. The Fed is meeting tomorrow, so we could see another quarter of a basis point interest rate hike that we aren't sure of. Just what we price bonds off of is what we call the AAA MMD scale. Just today alone, that went up between 5 and 7 basis points in the maturity years we're looking at. So in one day, it can shift that much. It also could shift back, but looking at this, we're so in this situation for the bank loan, knowing that the Fed, the market unease that we've seen this year, how much rates have increased over the year, that the Fed has said they're not anticipating necessarily stopping at this point, having a bank willing to lock in and hold that rate without a risk of the district. So if the board chooses not to move forward with it for some reason, you guys aren't held at fault for that, where a lot of banks would want, if you say you're going to move forward and then you don't, then that would be on you, not on them. So for them to hold that rate, that eliminates market uncertainty. We know today where that would shake out and what interest you would be paying. In addition, specifically, this bank provider did offer a portion of the financing to be able to be prepaid. And so the rate that they've offered was 4.05%, where your overnight investment rates right now, I think, are above 5% for just your overnight market. So that's money that you can easily access.
The money that we can invest in at that rate.
Right. So the bond proceeds that you get in, before you spend them, you can put them in that overnight fund, and that will help offset some of that interest as well. I know the question arises a lot with boards because they hear what's out there. We all see what mortgage rates are doing. Since the municipal market is priced off of a different index, it's tax exempt, it's not the same. So, we can still get attractive financing for, 20 years out there that would be under 5%. So it's not what you're seeing out in the market. And we look at structuring to find kind of the sweet spot when we have flexibility based on your capacity, your needs, your future needs, how much cash you need to have on hand. Those are all things we take into consideration to find the best sort of point in the yield curve to price the deal so that the district isn't paying more interest than they need to. So
It just stinks financing at the highest point of the market. This is one of the highest interest rates there are. It's usually
Well,
It's the highest.
I have a slide on that
there's no
too.
way to
So
predict it either, but
if we want to get through slide 12, I will get to your market update for you to kind of give you, we probably did that a little backwards, but 12 is your bonding capacity for your half penny. And so currently you could bond an additional 194 million of projects, maintaining that 1.5 coverage as well. That's in, so the blue again is your current outstanding. The bonding capacity runs through the final sunset date of 2036. And we're at the one times, and so the gray up here again is your PAYGO available. So if we want to flip to the market update then, and this will answer some of the questions, I think, and concerns on here. So this is your 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, 30 year. The gray bars are over the past 15 years where rates have been your lows and your highs. The blue bars are the averages, and your yellow bars are where we currently are today. And so we're looking at a 10-year bank loan for the district. So when you look at this, the average is 214, and it's a 296 in the market today. The front end, yes, we're at highs on the front end. We're at an inverted yield curve right now. That's not your standard. Normally you're lower on the front end, higher at 30 years. And you can see where we are. It's 325 in a 1 year and your 30 year at 392. So there's not much of a difference between your 1 and 30 year. Very unusual market. And so when we were looking at this, this spot here for the 10 years, we're not that much higher than averages over the past 15 years. If that helps answer some questions.
now, I understand there's a rule when you bond. You can't bond longer than what the sales tax is for. So let's say the sales tax is for the next 15 years. You can't do a 20-year bond. You got to. Now, on the bank loan, does that have the same restrictions as a bond?
Yes, yes. And so this is 10 years, while that's going out for 20 years. So we're well within that. We didn't even look at going out 20 years right now. So this debt would expire way before that tax is going to sunset. On slide 16 is just showing you again the breakout by series for the different debt service. The blue is your 2017 series, which expires next year. The orange is the 2015 series, which expires in 2025, and then the rest of this is just your capacity for PAYGO revenues. And what we are proposing, and you'll see this here, is a $60 million issuance. Your coverage is 2.35 times, so well above the 1.5 times that's required in the bond documents. So that's saying that you still have 2.3 times coverage to pay the amount of debt service that we would be issuing. We're going out to 2045, where it currently sunsets. The debt we're expiring in 2033, so it is 10 years out. We've done it, level debt service starting in 26 to 33.
So we could do another 10-year after that one's done, in other words.
Sure,
Or sooner.
or sooner.
If we had some big projects that we wanted to kick off in the next couple of years, we would look at another issuance. So that's why we want to keep a lot of this. It's good to have this capacity here for when we look forward for the next 20 years. As we'll want to time it based on when we want to get a lot of work done that we don't currently have cash on hand.
And this is still giving you over $400 million of PAYGO funds through the life of this program. So just to break, I know the district's preference is not to issue debt, so we are sensitive to that, looking at that, and when cash flows are coming in and trying to set you up for the best position as to not having to continuously come back. But we do know there's a lot of growth in the area, and so it's hard to keep up with that, and a lot of clients around the state are facing the same thing right now. Typically, they're not those who issue debt, and they're being forced to house the students to meet those needs right now.
It seems like this is kind of the amount, let's say 60 million, is kind of in the middle between not really resolving our needs and because it's not that much money, and then, right, like our needs are so much more than 60 million.
It's based on our current capital plan.
Which,
So based on our plan today and the timelines of when we've established that these projects are going to happen, that's how we've backed into when are we going to need how much cash.
but our current capital plan doesn't really take into
Doesn't take into account all of our
consideration
needs. So that's part of, and I'm glad you brought that up, because as we move forward and talk about the half-penny issue, and I know Dave's been doing a lot of really good work on pulling together all of our deferred maintenance along with the maintenance department. So those will continue. Those are conversations that we'll continue on with the board about, what amount of projects we want to start fronting sooner, which speaks to your question about, that would revise our capital plan, especially as we look forward to how we start building all this going into next year.
And that should be part of like the strategic plan.
Should be part of the strategic plan, it'll be part of our spring budget planning.
But to delay that a year
so-
even, again, I mean, it's.
No,
we're
the
just treading
conversation,
water, right?
no, we're absolutely not delaying the conversation a year. What we're saying is our next major upcoming comprehensive renovation projects, Oxa and Reedy Creek, this is based on when we would need the cash for those projects, based on those timelines kicking off.
You said in a meeting we had, you're not going to request the bond or whatnot until you know you're ready to build it, right? Isn't that something you said?
Well, we don't want to go out and get money
Right.
and then be like, well, we don't have a plan for the money. I mean, it needs to be based on what our plan is.
Right.
And that was kind of the question today he was saying. So let's say if we got the 60 million, but if it costs 120 million for Oxa, are you saying that we're paying? Oxa's gonna be. How much is Oxa gonna be?
But this is
Yeah,
based on
this
the
is for
calculations.
this is for what we need
Yeah.
for now, for this year. Then we're talking about Oxa kicking off next year.
Correct.
Yeah, what I'm saying though, I'm a little bit confused. You know what I'm saying? But like the 60 million, what would it be used for? Is there like a line of projects or something in there? Because I said, I know you mentioned Oxa, but Oxa's going to be 100 million. So is this going to just?
This is for our quarter penny program. So our transportation needs, our vehicles, this is really,
Or I guess what you're
really
saying
the
is
quarter
that
penny program.
money's fungible is what you're saying. It's like, we had 60 million in the kitty for Oxa as a pay-as-you-go,
This is
but
our
if we put the
quarter
money in
penny
here.
program.
So if I may, there are two different things there, Mr. Melendez. the quarter penny is for the transportation sites and some of our other needs, and then the half penny discussion is for Osceola and Reedy Creek, but both of them
So
are
the
being
60
bonded.
million transportation facility vehicles only, that's where this is going to.
This is really about transportation
Transportation.
right now.
Gotcha. Okay, and I remember Transportation West was not fully funded the last time we
That
had a
is correct,
conversation.
yes, sir.
I mean,
And
we
that's
had
just
some
because-
money for it, but not the whole thing.
That's just because of the timeline we wanted the facility to be built.
Because of the change.
Hey, stop saying that change. Yes.
I mean,
But we made the best decision we could, Mr.
Well, the thing is,
President.
there was two transportation facilities, whichever one came first, the price tag was
One
what
was
it
in
was.
order
to
Yeah, but one was needed at one point, and we went with the one that wasn't as needed as the one that we
So
put
this
on the
is
back
based
burner.
on the current direction to get both of them done
Right.
in this time
See,
frame.
now that makes it more tangible for me, and I understand it. So this 60 million will accelerate both transportation facilities to get up in line as soon as
Correct.
possible. I mean, you can do some other
That's a
things
fair way
too,
to say it.
but that helps, at least there's something immediate that we can say, okay, why are we doing this? We can say, we're gonna get both transportation centers up and running, and possibly, with some monies left over, if there are, some deferred maintenance issues corrected.
but the OXA conversation, which is what you're talking about, deferred maintenance wouldn't be under this, that would be under half penny.
And we'll get that.
We
to
wouldn't,
that in
yeah.
just a second. So this would just be the transportation, the quarter penny, the $60 million for the projects you guys said. And so on this, we did request the proposals, nothing, we would come back to the board on the 24th for approval with all of the financing documents on that piece. And if the board does approve, then we would close on November 1st. So those funds would be in hand on November 1st, and I believe my understanding is for construction to start shortly after that on the transportation projects. So that's just for the quarter penny infrastructure. And if we flip looking forward, and I think this is getting more into the discussion of where you guys are going for other needs and deferred maintenance outside of transportation, this is outlining your school capital outlay, which goes out until 2036. It's showing you your Series 2017A that goes to 2032 and your Series 2020A, which goes to 2030. That was a refunding, so that's why it's a little bit shorter. And then all of the gray, again, is your pay-go needs moving forward. So this is just your current outstanding debt, very minimal compared to what revenues are coming in. And so based on what Sarah was saying, and this is a fluid number, this is something that is a year to 18 months down the road based on the needs and the discussion of the board and the district. We would be looking at 120, and we just wanted to bring this to you today so you saw this we would come back and have a lot more discussions as it gets closer and things are a little bit more solidified. But for $120 million, you would have debt service coverage of 1.96 times in today's market. And you would still have over $292 million for your pay-go collections moving forward. And so the yellow bars would be your debt service. We structure it so it kind of wraps around so you still have an overall level program. And so if revenues go up, then that would just provide more capacity moving forward as well. I did want to state, we assume revenues stay flat from where they are today to just be conservative. So additional growth that comes in, fuels that sales tax, that's not assumed in any of the discussion we've had today.
That one's not nearly as comfortable.
Yeah, because it's not depending on impact fees, it's just sales tax. So you're right, so population
sales
growth
tax.
will automatic, well, not gonna say automatic, never mind. That's no such thing as automatic. But the point is, that's consumption.
Expected to go up over the course of a 20-year period, but there could be individual years where there's a
So, but it
recession.
don't average out, but you're saying, but you can even average out a higher amount, but you're being super conservative and saying it's just gonna flatline,
Yes,
so.
for the rest of the program. And this, we would come back with plenty more information and details and analysis for you when it gets closer.
And I appreciate that, by
to
the way, so I like that approach.
Today, so that was it, and any questions?
You can get off the hot seat. You did good.
Thank you.
Good? Thank you all.
Thank you, good job.